Close enough.
Welcome to fabulous Las Vegas.
Vegas, baby, Vegas!
The main drag on a Saturday night in Vegas.
How did this city of excess and neon end up in the middle of the desert? Well, I'll tell you, it's got a little something to do with Mormons, mobsters, and monopolizers. But for that story, we're gonna have to go back. And I'm talking way back. Long before the neon-lined busy streets, before extravagant resorts and entertainment hubs, before it was even called Las Vegas, this area was just a small meadow of sagebrush. The native Paiute tribe, experts at living off the barren desert land, called this area home for hundreds of years. This area of the West remained relatively untouched by the rapidly expanding United States, until 1844 when it was officially mapped by John Fremont, who was traveling the old Spanish Trail. He called it Las Vegas, which translates to the Meadows. 11 years later, Brigham Young, the president of the Mormon Church at the time, had just moved his people to Salt Lake and was looking to expand. He saw Fremont's map and he's like, yo, I want that. So Young sent 30 missionaries to Las Vegas to set up a fort and proselyte to or convert the native people. These 30 missionaries built this fort and tried but failed to cultivate the land. After multiple clashes with the native population over resources, the missionaries eventually abandoned the fort after only 2 years. This really isn't the end of the story for Mormons in Las Vegas, but more on that later. The fort stood for years as a landmark for wary travelers, and eventually it fell into the hands of this woman, Helen Stewart, who turned it into kind of a primitive hotel. Whoa, wait, does this count as like the first Las Vegas hotel? Helen anticipated a railroad to be built between Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. Knowing it would undoubtedly run through the small oasis, she started buying pockets of land around the area. Right she was when this guy and his railroad crew showed up. He bought most of Stewart's land for $55,000, which is over $1.5 million today. The dude she sold it to was William Andrew Clark, one of the richest men in the world. The guy literally bought his seat in the Senate. Clark was running a copper monopoly and needed the railroad to fulfill his other corporations. He had this crazy idea that maybe he could build a huge city in the middle of the desert. And maybe even crazier, he actually did. Honestly, Clark never even really lived in the city he started, nor its county that was named after him. Nope, he lived in a 120-room mansion on 5th Avenue in New York City. Honestly, there's so much more about this guy. If you haven't learned about robber barons like him or Vanderbilt or Rockefeller, go check him out. I mean, his kid was literally on the Titanic. Throughout the 1920s, Las Vegas remained a somewhat typical Old West town. Early on in its development, 2 blocks were set apart for the legal sale of alcohol, blocks 16 and 17, which soon became the Vegas Red Light District. Other businesses did find a way around this though. Hotels were allowed to sell alcohol, so if you wanted to start a bar and you weren't on block 16 or 17, you could just throw a few beds in the back room and call yourself a hotel. This kind of thinking and rule bending became the norm in Las Vegas. Even during federal prohibition, which lasted 13 long years, this city in the middle of the desert was just too damn far out of the way to enforce. This on its own made Las Vegas attractive to some of the shadier figures on the fringe of society. Moonshiners began pouring into town, bringing other illegal businesses along with it, like gambling and prostitution. The Mormons, who still made up most of the long-term population in Vegas since the railroad began, tried everything to combat this, but they were no match for the population boom that was to come. Enter the Hoover Dam.
Hoover Dam, over 1,000 feet wide and 727 feet to the bottom.
Hoover Dam is a travesty.
Originally named the Boulder Dam, construction began in 1931 to harness the power of the wild Colorado River. This brought in thousands of workers almost overnight, making Las Vegas their new home. This changed the trajectory of Las Vegas from a small railroad town to a growing working-class city, which being way out in the desert could offer a few more, let's say, freedoms. While Las Vegas wasn't hit extremely hard due to the construction of the Hoover Dam, the state of Nevada was still looking for ways to boost tax dollars. So Governor Fred Balzar signed a bill legalizing gambling in hopes to propel infrastructure. He said he had hopes for Las Vegas to become the Monte Carlo of America, which didn't exactly happen, well, at least not at first. 8 gambling licenses were given out to casinos on Fremont Street. Balzar also ended up signing another strange bill to help stimulate cash flow. This new bill made it easier to obtain a marriage license. Basically, back then it took forever to get paperwork processed, and a blood test was also required to get married. Nevada threw all that out the window with a short form to fill out that could be dropped off at a 24-hour office inside a train station, and they also did away with the blood test. This is what led Las Vegas to becoming known as the marriage capital of the world, where you can now get married at any one of the chapels lining the strip.
Just leave him in the car. We're only gonna be 5 minutes.
Now a pretty quirky place to get married. I mean, you could even get married by this guy.
And now you go.
In 1933, Prohibition ended and Vegas was the perfect place to celebrate. So while growing in population, visitors began flooding in, and Las Vegas was well on its way to becoming America's playground. Newlyweds and gamblers weren't the only ones finding opportunity in the booming desert city. Bugsy Siegel, yeah, that Bugsy Siegel, the famous American mobster who rose to fame bootlegging during Prohibition, helped finance one of the earliest resort casinos in Vegas. The Flamingo was basically the blueprint for Vegas glam. Its famous neon pink sign and oasis style was iconic. Siegel regularly had celebrity friends like Cary Grant, Clark Gable, and Frank Sinatra come hang out and gamble. Anyone who was anyone just had to be caught rolling the dice. Alright, so check this out. When the Flamingo was under construction, Bugsy had them fashion a custom suite with 17 exits, including an escape hatch leading to a secret tunnel under the casino. Because you know, mob things. Just like Bugsy, other mobsters like Johnny Roselli, Tony Accardo, and Frank Rosenthal set up their own operations in casinos like the Stardust, Hacienda, and Marina. The mob continued to run the town and its casinos all the way through the 60s. And these guys weren't the only eccentric casino owners. In 1966, Howard Hughes, yes, that Howard Hughes, isolated himself in his room for over a month. The owner threatened to kick him out, so Hughes just responded by buying the hotel. Howard Hughes also had another venture in casinos. Yet again, the Mormons are intertwined with this story too. Given their vast numbers in the area, they felt it almost necessary to get in on the casino action. Now this does seem a little ironic given that they are pretty devoutly against drinking and gambling.
You're a Mormon. Next to you, we all have a drinking problem.
Anyway, the Mormon church was sick of the mob having so much control in their city. Howard Hughes, who wanted to expand his real estate ventures, and the Mormons had a similar interest: get the mob out. So they teamed up and started buying up casinos. Yeah, the Mormons were buying casinos. They were even known as the Mormon Mafia. By the 70s, Vegas became the Vegas we think of today, completely leaning into its quirky glitz and glam. Nightly shows from Liberace, Elvis, and the Rat Pack made Las Vegas a truly unique experience. Mega resorts started to grow out of the desert, like the Mirage, Excalibur, Luxor, MGM Grand, housing smaller worlds within themselves, offering a variety of tastes from different parts of the world. And yes, often vastly appropriating and oversimplifying cultures like ancient Rome, Egypt, South America, Paris, and many more. By the end of the 20th century, 37 million people flocked to Las Vegas every year. Alright, I've got to confess something to you. I might have been lying. All this, it's not Las Vegas. This, not Las Vegas. Not this either. Nope. Not even this sign. Let's put it this way, if you booked a trip right now to stay in one of the main resorts on the Strip, flew into McCarran National Airport, spent the weekend on the Strip, and even got your picture taken in front of the "Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas" sign, you would have never actually stepped foot in Las Vegas. All of this is actually an unincorporated town called Paradise. For tax purposes, most of the resorts set up shop just outside of the actual city of Las Vegas. This worked in the mob's benefit where they could pay out of pocket for upgrades and, most importantly, security. Where Las Vegas City Police don't have jurisdiction. For instance, if you were caught counting cards or cheating the system in any way, who knows what would actually happen to you? Whoa, that's a really dark thought. Today, Paradise is the US's largest unincorporated city. Basically, what this means is the county controls gambling, so when they tax it, the money goes to the public school system. Paradise, Las Vegas, Sin City, whatever you choose to call it, it's still a great place to visit today. However, Las Vegas might have experienced its last surge in the early 2010s. The popularity of internet gambling over the past few years has hit the city's in-person gambling pretty hard. There's been an obvious push for different kinds of tourism, with an NHL expansion team and moving the NFL's storied Raiders into futuristic stadiums. In keeping with tradition of legalizing indulgences, Nevada was early in legalizing the use of recreational marijuana in 2017. Just like the rest of the world, Las Vegas was hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Casinos couldn't open and tourism came to a screeching halt, but it's yet to be seen how it can fully bounce back. Due to its lack of fully established rules and its location, Las Vegas has always been a city built on change. Years and years of demolishing the old to bring in the next state-of-the-art resort is starting to show. The trademark flashing neon being swapped out for massive 4K LED screens is just one of the newest trends. But don't worry, you can still see all of these signs if you're interested. Most of the iconic neon signs from the historic city our house here in the Neon Museum. A huge boneyard of rusting metal. It's beautiful and a little cathartic. Since its beginning, Las Vegas has been defined by two kinds of people. Those looking to change their luck, and the rich looking to profit off of it. Sin City appeals to some of our culture's worst instincts of greed and excess. But it also appeals to some of our best instincts of hope, adventure, and acceptance of the weird and absurd. Las Vegas has so much to offer almost everyone, from extravagant resorts hosting poolside parties to truly one-of-a-kind shows that collect visitors from all over the world. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about fabulous Las Vegas, so the next time you're there, you can really appreciate the history of its flashing neon lights. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, go check out brighttrip.com, where they've got an expanding library of amazing travel courses to help you get the most out of your next trip. Alright, so I gotta know, comment below your favorite Las Vegas movie, and tell me why it's Miss Congeniality 2 Armed and Fabulous.